innovative payment platforms. Just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview. Mobile payment platforms are undoubtedly one of the fast-growing FinTech subsectors, and we will be talking about the latest innovations, assessing adoption of mobile money solutions, as well as the viability of blockchain for remittances. I'm going to let each one of these gentlemen introduce themselves. I will be monitoring the clock, so don't talk too much. And then we'll jump into the questions. So I will go ahead and start with Eric.
My God, good at
Technology.
Yeah, right.
Technology.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Brett. I'm CEO of Aliant Payment Systems. We are registered ISA, basically, with Wells Fargo, Synovus Bank. We're a facilitator of payment processing products for mid-level sized businesses. Basically, we've been around for about 15 years, well established in the payment industry. I think we're one of, at least at our level, probably one of the first that have kind of entered into the crypto world as far as bringing that payment option directly to the merchant base. It's something that it's pretty exciting for us to actually look at and actually bring out to merchants. So basically our job is to bring it out to kind of the everyday kind of merchant, talk to them about the the benefits of accepting cryptocurrency and what they are as compared to what they're accepting right now. And so basically we're payment facilitators for that. Have many different business models, but usually e-commerce, B2B, high-risk accounts are also something that we look at as well. And the reason really we got into it, some of our merchants do struggle with traditional banking and also payment processing services. And we wanted to bring a different option, and we're always looking for, a viable option, something that's going to be cost effective and also guaranteed funds. So we started looking into the crypto world, and it's evolved pretty quickly. And it's actually been great listening to everybody here and learning a lot more about blockchain and cryptocurrency.
Hello everybody, Rajesh, Shakkarwar from Verient. We are a business-to-business payment technology company. We have a cloud-based SaaS platform which we offer to large banks as a white label product, and then they label that with their branding and sell those products outside. We have two products. One is called ePayable, which automates business-to-business payments. You might be surprised to find out that even today, when a business in the US pays another business, $17 trillion are paid by checks. And what our platform does is gets rid of check. It extracts all the information from the business's ERP system, and the vendor who needs to be paid, instead of paying a check, it generates a one-time use virtual credit card, and the vendor gets paid through a one-time use virtual credit card. The average ticket size of payments is $10,000. Sometimes we have generated the virtual cards for like $7 million. And we have about 325,000 businesses using our platform today. The second product we have is called Spend Control, which allows you to physically control a physical plastic remotely through the buyer's ERP system or through consumers or small, medium-sized businesses' mobile phone. So you can have controls such as allow this card to be used only today, only at this specific location, only from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., only at this specific merchant to buy the specific goods. Many use cases, but one of the simple use cases would be you're a contractor, you have 10 employees, they have cards, they go to Home Depot, call you and say, I need to make a payment, buy this stuff, it's $800. Just from your phone, you can increase the limit to $800 and they can use the card at $800. Otherwise, it's zero. So those are the two main products we process in billions of dollars. We have 28 patents in payment-related technologies, and we have been very closely monitoring blockchain. We see specific advantages and some technologies for blockchain we could incorporate. And since our customers are banks, it all depends on how the banks adopt blockchain, and that's where we would be then using blockchain as the last mile to the payment execution.
Hi there, my name is Klaus Beck. I, since last week, actually run business development strategy and partnerships for Braintree. We are a company part of PayPal. We were acquired by PayPal a few years ago. I've been with Braintree for 6 years. We raised money back in 2012 from NEA and Excel, $70 million, specifically focusing on helping merchants convert all the buyers that were started coming in on mobile devices and make them be able to buy more products and services through better technologies around payment processing, as well as all the companies that were growing up in that mobile-first area, such as Uber and Airbnb, would be using our platform from day one. And we focus on two areas: making it easy from a development perspective, developer tools, and we're making mobile payments easy. That turned out to be really timely, and PayPal gave us an offer we couldn't refuse a few years ago when we joined, and now operate as an independent company, helping transform PayPal from a payment method to becoming a full-service provider of every payment processing needs that a company or a merchant, that we like to call it, would use. As part of that journey, we also bought Venmo in 2012. They were a small little company from New York. Today, last quarter, they're processing $15 billion in mobile-only B2B. People splitting checks at the restaurants or paying rent or whatever have you. The reason why we bought Venmo back in the day was we were so focusing on helping companies doing mobile payment experiences better. How could you possibly do that if you don't understand the consumer side? So that was part of the journey of us getting involved also in the consumer side.
Hi, I'm Jim Kresge. I'm the head of digital commerce engineering at Capital One. I've done a bunch of things there. I started Capital One's mobile software engineering practice a long time ago, built Capital One's first mobile apps, have done all of our work on digital payments, including Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Google Pay, those sorts of things, including building our own NFC tap-to-pay solution in the Capital One wallet. I started our conversational voice practice where we've launched solutions for things like Amazon Alexa and that sort of thing for Capital One. And I'm also head of the engineering side of Capital One Labs. Most recently doing some what I hope is interesting things with payment tokens. I'm going to talk a little bit about that here. And I'd like to say I actually really liked the first couple of sessions this morning. I think the tension between larger banks and what's happening in blockchain and distributed ledgers in the FinTech world is a very healthy thing, actually. I think from that tension comes opportunity, and opportunity for goodness. So I'm actually very excited to be here and talk to some folks about that.
Excellent, thank you. So the first thing that I want to talk about today is new trends and innovations as you guys are experiencing or developing regarding merchant and/or consumer adoption. And I also want to, if you could, just clarify whether you're talking when you guys talk about your innovations, whether it's B2B, B2C, or C2C, just to kind of give the folks an idea of the perspective that you're coming from. If you want to. Do you want to start, Eric, and we can kind of work, and then we'll work back, and I'll give you each an opportunity to be first.
So I think for us, as far as innovation is, everything with us is B2B. I think our clients are some are well versed when it comes to blockchain and crypto. Most are not. So for us, it's bringing out a product that is something that's going to be user friendly is important. So if you're looking at mass adoption, if you're looking at bringing this out to the general public, it has to be something that merchants are familiar with using and are kind of trying to cut down on the learning curve. So for us, it's looking at our crypto platform and trying to make it something that's familiar, that can easy to navigate using mobile devices, easy API. We're actually we have a retail option as well, being able to bring crypto to a retail option. We're also working on a fully encompassed product that would have all major credit cards, debit cards, and also crypto all into one portal. That's something that we're actively working on right now.
So I'll talk more about B2B business. And as you can imagine, business-to-business payments is a very, very large space, trillions of dollars just in the US. You bring in the cross-border payments, it's closer to $100 trillion. And when you bring that kind of volume of payments, and then you look at the existing systems, they're pretty arcane. Not a lot of automation, not a lot of data mining, not a lot of data, not a lot of intelligence, no machine learning. And so the scope for innovation it's totally a greenfield opportunity. There is tremendous opportunity for many companies to innovate. And the innovation we are seeing is similar to what we are doing. We are automating the payments, we are reconciling the payments, we are allowing the businesses to reconcile the payments automatically, bringing a tremendous amount of value in the data we are bringing so that their business becomes easier. So from a business point, it's more how do I make my business easier? How do I make my payments as something as a strategic value to my business rather than just a method of paying somebody? How can I use my payment methods as a way to keep my vendors supplying the products and services to me at a better rate, or be a strategic partner and use payments as a kind of increasing the value of the company? Those are the places, some of the places we are seeing innovation.
Yeah, so I think my perspective would be, just to tie back to that, helping companies with their B2C payments for the most part. I think you can go in a number of different directions on the question for us. We were very fortunate as a startup, kind of tapping into a macro trend and work with innovation to solve the macro trend that a lot of companies were worried about, which was if the world, if you think back 2010, 11, 12, mobile phones becoming the primary computing devices for a lot of individuals, and with that they behave and interact differently. But one of the consequences of that for a lot of companies, they weren't buying products and services as much as they used to. So unless I fix that, I have a big problem. So that sort of having an innovation that actually happened to time into something that was really urgent for a lot of companies is very helpful when you're a startup, at least, because you get a lot of companies that are willing to listen to you and see how you can help. I think in many cases, payments have a tendency to get in the way. So I don't know if anyone actually, at least not on the merchant side, ever is looking for change. They just want to do more things from a business perspective, and quite frequently payments is complicated. A lot of companies have a hard time understanding the dynamics in the payments. And the technology that are involved with payments in many cases are quite hard to efficiently make better or simpler or less opaque. And if you can solve that, tying a little bit back to what you were saying, making it easier, making it more transparent, making it faster to actually execute in response to macroeconomic trends or changes in the industry, then innovation means something for many. But if you don't do that, then innovation is just a word, right? You're not going to sell anything just because you have any innovation as part of your sales pitch. You either deliver value to the business or you don't. That's how we kind of think of innovation, right? So great, the technology can do good things, but does it actually solve my business problem? If it doesn't, I'm not going to have the budget to actually bother going through with the change. So I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing already.
Yep. Thinking about what I can add to what the group has said, I specialize in consumer payments and consumer spending and purchasing in particular. And I would say consumer payments is an area that's ripe for disruption. It has been for a long time, frankly, and many organizations are trying to solve it, but really haven't cracked it yet. And I think it's still sort of a big bogey that's out there, a big opportunity. I think there's three things that need to be true to really sort of transform payments. I think one is creating something which is truly friction-free and just so easy as to be almost not there, totally transparent. The other is just safety and security. That's number two, which is a must. And then the third is ubiquity, and just available to use it and do it anywhere, anytime. And I think if you look at some of the more innovative things that have happened over the past, 7-8 years, you'll see some different attempts there. Apple Pay is a great example. People cite Apple Pay all the time. There's some great things about it. It's definitely more secure in the way that it's involved with sort of the communication with point of sale terminal and key exchange and all the other crypto stuff that goes on around that, which is great. But really, arguable as to whether it was really any simpler than using a credit card. Did it really reduce friction? Certainly ubiquity there is a big problem. Not all merchants accept it, not all people have access to it. Some other really interesting models, I don't know how many folks have seen or shopped at an Amazon Go store, but the idea is it makes the physical in-store shopping experience feel sort of like shoplifting, but without the negative ramifications of it. You just go in and you pick up stuff and you walk out, and that's it. And that's actually great, like friction-free, totally. not a lot of ubiquity there. It's early days. One that, again, this is a little bit of a trite example, but it just makes the case. I think Uber is great. Uber is used by lots and lots of people. And the payment experience is not, like, you don't even know it's not there, right? You're getting a ride, and that's what you see, and payment happens in the background. So I think like there's little pieces and pockets of these innovations that have gotten it right, but I don't think anyone has put all three together of friction-free safety, security, and ubiquity, and we're still to see what that's going to be.
I was just going to add to that. I would argue if Uber actually had a payment experience, I don't think the company would have been successful.
Yeah, that's true.
Is the infrastructure for payments in the United States, as far as the existing infrastructure, is that a positive, is it a negative, is it a don't care? Can you talk a little bit about like the infrastructure that we have, and this is specific to the US, that may or may not be impacting your various innovations?
It's archaic. I don't know how else to say it. It's it's something that's been around for a long time. I've been in payments pretty much my whole professional career, and it really hasn't changed all that much. The rails that everybody runs on are very similar to what they were 20 years ago. I think you've seen some development in the way of the internet authorizing transactions, but basically the way a payment is processed, in the merchant world is basically the same as it's been for quite some time. It definitely needs to change. I don't think it's efficient. I don't think it's cost effective. So when you look at something like digital currency, that's what you're bringing to the table. You're bringing to the table something that is much more efficient, cost effective, and it just has that ability to make that kind of that seamless payment that basically bring the user experience a much better experience than what we currently have. There's just too many steps right now, and I think everybody would like to see a change.
So that was the fundamental reason I started Verient. And how many here know what tandem computer is? Tandem computer.
Oh, I know it.
Okay. How many here know what is COBOL programming language? Okay. So majority of the processing even today is done on tandem computers using COBOL programming language. Okay?
Okay, you scared me.
Yes. So when I started Verient, that was the main reason I started. So if you look at the existing payment infrastructure in the US, the good part is it is very scalable infrastructure. It has huge amount of every credit card processing companies being, processing in $500, $600 billion, like, you look at the big credit card processors. Visa, MasterCard, almost close to $3 trillion going through their network. So it's a very scalable infrastructure. It's used widely. It's widely used across the country, but it's based on technologies 40, 50 years ago, and not a lot had changed. So if you want to bring innovation within that infrastructure, it's close to impossible. And so what our approach was that rather than trying to change the infrastructure, we created a layer of software which sits on top of the existing infrastructure. So to the existing infrastructure, it looks exactly the same way. So our platform brings all this innovation I'm talking about. And to the merchants, it looks just like a regular credit card transaction. To the businesses, it looks just like a credit card transaction. And to the processor, it just looks like a regular credit card transaction. But with this middle layer of software, which is our cloud-based SaaS platform, we can bring all this different innovation by keeping the interface points compatible with the past infrastructure. And so, in my opinion, the infrastructure is very archaic and problematic, but at the same time, it's very stable, secure, and highly scalable. So we have to take advantage of the highly secure, scalable infrastructure and figure out how you can innovate to take advantage of that and bring innovation. And that's where I believe there is a lot of opportunity.
I would add one more dimension to it. Maybe I think one thing about payments in the US that's a little bit different than quite a lot of other large economical markets is there's a very large part of the US consumer base that are actually not included in the market. And the less money you make, the more expensive it is to actually use payments for getting your payroll, storing it, using it to pay. So I think the US has a pretty significant chunk of the population that's actually not part of the payment rail and pay much more than you would do if you're a high frequency, loyal credit card user, you get a lot of perks and free airline travel, etc. if you're other end of the spectrum of that, you're going to have a meaningful chunk of your pay actually being taken out of it just for doing very basic transactions. I don't see that having worked in a lot of international markets the last 5 years. You don't really see that in markets of the maturity that the US are. Of course, you will see it in developing markets more, but that's a very unusual thing, and I think it's a big opportunity to make payment easier for also the non-included in the ecosystem of payments today.
Yeah, I just add, I think there's a lot of innovation that's going on top of the existing infrastructure, which at its base has been around a very long time. I think there's just an interesting question of how long can that persist building on top of that base versus just actually moving to something that new. And I think, you know, there may be things happening internationally where other regions may not be saddled with historical infrastructure at all, and they just leapfrog directly to the new thing. Like there's many countries that have gone straight to mobile, you know, technology a decade ago when the U.S. was still using dial-up things with cords and all that. And so I think there may be an interesting tipping point in the future, but I think what I see right now is there's a lot of innovation going on in the existing rails.
So do you see blockchain and cryptocurrency maybe replacing it or optimizing it? Where do you see blockchain and cryptocurrency impacting the payments markets? We can start down that end.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. I think if you take the US market, there are many rails for payments. One is credit cards. I think Visa, Mastercard have done a fantastic job to build an ecosystem that virtually is impossible to get around if you're in that sort of consumer payments. But I do see that in other markets around the world, there are very aggressive regulation coming in around making payments a national interest and don't having US companies actually powering something as important as payments. So that's on the one hand. By definition, therefore, there are more opportunities in other markets where maybe non-US companies are powering it. And then I think the other major rail is sort of bank-to-bank transfer, making them instant. I think in the US there's challenges because there are so many banks and so much complexity. I think some other markets may have, in many cases, fewer banks, therefore having an easier time to building a national rail of instant payments. And if that happened, then of course you don't necessarily need change because now your transactions are again covering the needs and people building things on top. But if you don't have that infrastructure or the consumer base are jumping directly to the mobile or whatever have you, then I think you will build very different ecosystems in emerging markets than you will in the established market. It's just quite frankly, it's too expensive to change and don't necessarily bring enough value to the infrastructure that powers this to actually bother.
So I have a little bit more technical, more nuanced answer. Depends on timing. So if you look in the short term, blockchain can bring in some advantages to be the last mile in certain areas, particularly in case of business-to-business payment. It could be something which could be used for cross-border payments, because there is a lot of nuances in cross-border payments where you have to have a corresponding bank, and then there is somebody who's doing the currency translation. And if you had, plus then you have to have somebody to do that clearing. But if you had something like cryptocurrency, where it could work, but for that cryptocurrency has to become more stable, not have the kind of valuation changing so much. Or in the case of where the blockchain, where the ledger can be managed by multiple parties, that could become very valuable in case of financial aid to certain countries where there's a lot of corruption and the end users are not getting the money, in which case the financial aid could be using that kind of payment method to have a public ledger to know who is actually getting paid. That's the kind of short-term answer. In the long term, I do see blockchain has, if you look at cryptocurrency, I kind of break it into two parts. The transaction part and the ledgering part. And they don't have to necessarily go hand in hand. So if you take the existing payment infrastructure in the US, you have a credit card authorization, for example, going through the credit card rails. That follows a standard called ISO 8583. That standard was written like 40 or 50 years ago. And it has different transaction types, 100 transaction, 120, 110, 400. And those are basically saying how when I swipe my credit card, the card number is going through the credit card rates all the way to the name to saying, okay, I'm authorizing this particular transaction. So if you take the cryptocurrency and break the blockchain part and the public-private key part, you could actually replace the ISO 8583 messaging rather than going through the network with the public-private key for making an authorization part. And because the clearing and settlement is happening between the banks, you really don't need the public ledger part. So there is so much innovation that can happen, but it's going to take time.
So I'm definitely a firm believer in blockchain as far as replacing the existing rails that we run on right now as well as crypto. It's right here. It's a cost factor is what it is, and to be able to change that, it's definitely the U.S. took a long time to adopt EMV, way too long. But again, that was a cost factor, and I think it's going to be the same thing. I think it's there's a lot of advantages there. Again, you're replacing very old technology with something that's very new. So I think banks are they're notorious about moving pretty slow. So I think they're going to have to warm up to it a little bit first, see where the advantages are. But I think it's going to come down to what the cost is, and once they see advantages in cost, and then also competition, if they see where somebody else is going to outcompete with them. They're going to be forced. They're going to be forced. But unfortunately, it seems like when it comes to the processing industry, that's kind of what has to happen. They almost have to be kind of forced into that direction to make those changes. For me, it's pretty focused and clear. I've seen it in my company and for my clients. I know when we go out and talk about it with merchants and clients, just like regular everyday type businesses, they love hearing about it. It changes the scope of our conversations completely. I mean, when it comes to credit cards and current banks, it's not a great subject, but when you start talking crypto, the smiles come on and there's a lot of questions, and it's pretty interesting, it's a lot of fun, and I hope it does change out, but I'm a firm believer that blockchain and crypto will replace it eventually.
What's EMV? You use an acronym I'm not familiar with.
So EMV was the transition from your mag stripe to your chip cards. And it's basically just came down to the cards they're just much more expensive to produce. I mean, considering there's so many cards out there, and then also converting equipment, when you have point of sale type equipment and things along those lines. But yeah, EMV is just basically your conversion from your standard mag stripe to your chip cards.
We heard earlier from Jesse, I don't know if you guys had an opportunity to attend the keynote, about the amount of friction in international payments from consumer or business to consumer, etc. Where do you guys see as far as cross-border, cross-wallet transactions? What innovation there, reducing friction? What's in the future there for us, near term or long term?
Well, Angle, for as a starting point for that answer, I think PayPal originally was really about making payments online easy and safe and secure. Then it became really a better way of solving cross-border, and that's a huge part of PayPal's value prop for the 19 million companies that are using PayPal for B2C payments today. But it's still such a long way to go. There's so much more work to be done, because cross-border payments are the underlying rails, regardless of building it out, since there's quite a few ecosystems that are building cross-border transactions today. It is slow, there are errors, it is expensive, and all that. So there's a big opportunity, but I think what's easy to forget is there's a lot of countries that are regulating the access points, right? Even in today's rails, and that is actually one of the reasons why it's hard. I think as some random example, in Venezuela, as an example, there was a regulatory requirement to actually intercept Visa transactions and Mastercard transactions coming into the country, because they want to regulate how much money as a consumer you could spend outside the country. So there is actually, a credit card cloud, and then there is another cloud on a domestic level, and then the government actually controls what goes in and out of the country. Or if you take Brazil, their regulation of actually moving money out of the country, you need to pay tax for that. So even if you wanted, you couldn't necessarily make that go away, because that's what the government wanted. They are the one who control the access points. So that, I think, is the real issue and the real challenge to make some of the cross-border in places where it's really hard. to be a little bit easier. Moving money around between the US or the UK or US or France or something like that, if you take PayPal, we don't really have a problem with that. You can power that on a bank and you can move billions of dollars instantly on the ecosystem. It doesn't really provide any pain points at this point. They would have been when you build it out, but in those markets it's not really an issue. And in the markets where we do have issues, it's all about the regulations and the people kind of trying to control that experience.
So if your question was regarding cryptocurrency and cross-border payment, then there are a couple challenges. So the advantage cryptocurrency brings is it removes the third parties from in between to be able to make the money movement. It takes away the requirement for currency conversion you have today. But that also poses a challenge because if you look particularly from business to business payments, every large corporation, which is a multinational, they have a specific unit within their company which is doing currency hedging. So they're figuring out how much currency I need to hedge today. What am I going to think is the dollar to yen or dollar to euro is going to change, and then they're going to do currency hedging. Then in those companies, there are CPAs. They're doing that based on the currency hedging. They have to report for tax purposes in a very specific way. So there is a lot of infrastructure around this built within large corporations on how you do currency hedging and how you report that from income tax purposes. And so when cryptocurrency comes in, it has to figure out how it is going to ride the rails of all this existing infrastructure, or is it going to say throw this away and create a new one? If it's throw this away and create a new one, that's going to create a lot of friction. And so it depends on how it's going to come in. The solution itself might be elegant, but the existing policies, procedures, business as usual, can it accommodate and work with that is the bigger challenge.
And it wasn't just cryptocurrency, because I think just with fiat currency, we have challenges, as Klaus was pointing out, as far as cross-border wires and transmission of money. So I don't know if that gives you further comments, because I very appreciate the crypto perspective, but also from a fiat.
Yeah, I mean that does add to there is local regulations. The regulations related to what is allowed to go in, what is allowed to go out, how much government is controlled, and then when you add that on top of crypto, certain countries are kind of talking about blocking crypto, or certain countries are not going to block crypto. So cross-border then kind of comes into the regulations in each country. Particularly with respect to the U.S., then the question becomes, money laundering laws, KYC, Patriot Act, compliance with all those rules and regulations. All those complexities come into the play when you're doing international money transfer.
Pretty much agree with everything these guys said. It's a very inefficient process, and it's pretty expensive. There's quite a few steps that are involved in it. I think crypto could take out a lot of those steps, make it more efficient. When we're talking to clients about being able to move money internationally, it's definitely something we look at crypto as the better option. But again, you've got countries involved, you've got banks involved, you've got cross-border fees where they definitely make a great profit margin, which they do not want to go away. Wire fees, the SWIFT codes and all of that. It's it does come down to a financial factor, but there are so many moving parts with an international transaction, and to get everybody together to be able to accept possibly what kind of payment that would be more efficient would be a pretty difficult task for sure. It's different doing it within your own country where you can comply with those regulations, but having to do it in another country and somehow figure out both sides and the compliance regulations that come with that and the costs that come along with it. It's pretty difficult. Moving money internationally I think PayPal is definitely the best job when it comes to payments aspect. I think PayPal by far does the best job in the payment industry with it.
You can pay him later.
I already did.
In Litecoin, there you go. So I have a bonus question. Because we are in the state of California, we are at the state of digital money, and the gentleman who curates this also curates the state of cannabis. So when it comes to payments and cannabis, can you talk about your perspectives? If you don't have one, that's fine as well, but where you may or may not be seeing innovation in that area.
I've got that one. All right.
It's actually an industry we looked at right away. We actually had Potcoin get a hold of us about opening up an ACH account for their exchange. You know, we've got quite a few exchanges come to us to try to get ACH accounts. So the cannabis industry, I mean, if we could, you know, get federal regulators to move out of the way, it would be an excellent industry for crypto. It goes hand in hand. That, I think, gaming right along with it as well. For us, we looked at it and just decided that, you know, hey, look, it's still considered a federal crime. There's no reason for us to go down that road. We don't have to. You know, we're very successful with the program we put together now. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to. We have a lot of people that ask. It's probably, I would say, it's pretty close to the #1 industry from all of our outside agents. You know, different you know, sales channels that we have coming in. I would probably say they all ask at some point. So, and especially since our niche is you know, in e-commerce and high risk and hard to place businesses. I would love to see it. I think it's a great emerging industry. There's a lot of value there. But yeah, unfortunately right now, until things change on a government level, you know, we're not, you know, doing it right now.
I would echo what you just said, because we looked at it. I think it's potentially a very lucrative business, it's potentially a very large business, and I think there is a very good correlation between, or you know, synergy between part industry and cryptocurrency. But we kind of we decided not to go that route specifically because federal, you know, it's still a federal crime, and I don't think any legitimate business would venture into it till the time, you know, it's also okay from the federal point of view.
And I think it's interesting you say gambling. I think it sort of represents the same challenge. Anytime if you have scale, I think it's easy to build a great technology. It's like, hey, I don't have a problem. I've never been audited or having any regulator coming after me. But if you're big, you're typically first in line if you are companies like that. And I think when there's uncertainty in regulation, the potential downside and the consequences if you don't get it right, and it's hard to get it right when you're going to be first in line to be audited, when there's uncertainty in regulation. And that can be very expensive. It can be fines, or it could be impact on your brand that drives down your stock price, things like that. And in many cases, you forget that it may not be worth being first, because you could take a hit, or the risk is unquantifiable. And for big companies, that is typically impossible to deal with. Someone got to sign off on that, and if it's unquantifiable, no one wants to sign off on it. So it's tricky when you have uncertainty on some of those aspects.
I'm not actually going to answer the question asked exactly, but I actually think it's fascinating that there are, and instructive, there are particular use cases where the specifics of what cryptocurrency brings are sort of just what is needed in the situation. So you mentioned gaming as well, e-gaming and things. I think there are these use cases, maybe it's industries or maybe it's just use cases where crypto has some specific superpowers, and actually I think like there's probably going to be, if I look forward, I think it's in those industries and use cases where we're going to see some, you know, initial material footholds that could lead to ongoing growth.
So since I'm old enough to remember this, I think, you know, there was virtual currencies once upon a time on the internet that was solving some of the same problems, and in gambling in particular, the US government were extremely aggressive on the companies that were building access points to those virtual currencies 10, 15 years ago, and basically took people straight off the airports, in a couple of cases to jail. It's not for everyone to take that risk. I'm just saying it's not for everyone to play with that sort of risk. That makes it even harder. If the government is very, very determined, and we're not talking financial fine, but jail time in terms of you're on the wrong side where popular regulation is at the time, it can be tricky, right?
Yeah, the risk is too high.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is, because you gentlemen have been very successful and have been in the payments arena for quite some time, if you could just share with the audience maybe 2 or 3 key pieces of advice or lessons learned for folks who are interested in innovating or starting companies or getting into the payment platform or payments arena.
Getting into
To the payments arena, that's, I'm not even sure I would do it again.
It does sound a little boring.
It's pretty tough. I would say just as far when it comes to cryptocurrency, it's really letting merchants know that that's a form of payment that you want, to accept. Usually the pushback that we get, even back when we did adoption for debit card days, was, all the customers don't ask for it. And then the merchants, won't accept it. So I would just say as far as that point would be, is to go out there and ask for it. They definitely will. As far as getting involved in the payment industry, it really comes to, payment industry is just evolving into a technology industry. It's really not so much as it is payments anymore as the technology. So I would definitely look at, the technology aspect of it through ISVs and things along those lines if you're looking to get into it. Probably try to scale pretty quickly if you can. It's definitely very fast moving at this point. But yeah, that's what I would say.
So I come from the technology world. So when I started Verient, I had no background in payment. So like any other tech entrepreneurs, I'm like, how hard can this be? I can solve these problems. I'm going to start a company. So I can tell you that it's a very big opportunity. It's a very large industry, but it is very slow moving. Change is very hard. It takes a long time for people to change their behaviors. It's a highly regulated industry, so risk, compliance, those are at much higher priority to the ecosystem than innovation. So your innovation has to fall within compliance, regulation, laws, all that kind of stuff, and then also frictionless. So if you can come up with something which can play within the ecosystem, you can create a solution which is frictionless, and you're not, basically upsetting the apple cart, then you have a very good shot at creating something which is very large, and you can, reap benefits from that.
So three things comes to mind for me, thinking about it from when we started Braintree. I think number one, focus on the customer. No matter how much money you can raise today, they are the one who are going to pay for your electricity or your salary or the Christmas party. So relentless focus on the customers, making it easier, making it better, servicing them well, whatever the dimension that you like to focus on as a company. Number two, as a leader, hire better, smarter people than yourself. I think it's obvious that really good, driven people who do good things do the work. One of those do much better work than three people who are a little bit more mediocre, or don't have the aspiration, or don't have the understanding. And then number three, for the organization you're creating, culture matters. Focus a lot on culture. I think so many startups fail around culture because at the end of the day, there are going to be a lot of changes. Payments is full of every day, it feels like. There's either something with politics or something with payments that are changing every day. And it's hard to keep track of, and I think you need to create a culture around that, because change is inevitable, and you need to rally around a lot of change in the journey of the company. If you have bad culture, you're never going to make it, so focus on that from day one.
I think those are all great answers. One thing that I would add that's particular about payments, some folks touched on it, I would obsess about scale from the beginning. A better mousetrap means almost nothing if you can't figure out a way to scale it, and that's because of things like legislation, slow moving, whatever. Like you can have a great science experiment. I can solve this problem. The problem's solved, and crickets. Like obsessing about scale. How do you optimize your funnel? How do you get the most eyes on your idea? How do you get leverage points where you can get the kind of exposure or go big in a space to really get traction and take hold? And I think everywhere along the way, think about how you're going to scale, and don't just build a better mousetrap, but think about how you're going to get that mousetrap in everyone's hands.
Excellent. Those are all the questions that we have up here. Do we have questions? We have time for questions out from the audience.
Hey, thanks guys. These payment panels always seem to be focused on the merchant's point of view. As a end user of cryptocurrency, I like paying my rent with Bitcoin when Bitcoin is $15,000. not so much when it's down to $6,000, so I'd like to use a Amex card or a credit card to pay my rent, and then juice that or pay off my credit card with crypto. So when are we going to see a solution for us to pay off our credit cards natively, not like a middleman that will take your cash and pay your credit cards for you? But when is Amex going to start accepting crypto, I guess is my question.
I feel as though I should answer that. I don't have a great answer. Actually, it's certainly not about Amex. But I feel like there's a level of concern, and I don't mean to, I'm not speaking for any bank, not even mine here, but I feel like there's a level of concern about currency risk. There might be a lot of other reasons too, but I feel like there's a level of concern about currency risk that might be at the base of some of it, about why everybody's not immediately integrating with it. And maybe it's like folks up here have said, as consumer demand grows and there's more of a desire to do it, like some of the slow-moving things may melt away and it may come about. And I don't really have honestly, I don't have a great answer for like when that's going to happen. I feel like it might be a critical mass thing, and there's not that critical mass there.
I can answer for you. 5 years.
I would say 5 years. I mean, you're basically going to have to look at, when it takes adoption, so if you keep on getting it out there and keep on asking for it, keep on requesting it, as there's more education to merchants. Merchants are typically going to push back a little bit when it comes to something new in payments because it's a cost to them. Of course they want to cater. When we look at something on payments, I look at it from the consumer point of view, the end point of view, because you're the one that drives the payment industry. You really are. You're the one that'll tell us if you like an Apple Pay or if you don't like an Apple Pay or so on and so forth. We're kind of looking at a mass adoption in a 5-year range. That's hopefully what we're looking at. But as people keep requesting and keep wanting it, the companies that are out there that are truly listening their customers and care about their customers, they have no choice but to listen. And once they listen, then they'll adopt it, then it'll get what you want.
But in my opinion, I have a little bit different opinion. I believe unless the currency becomes stable, nobody's going to accept it. Because if I'm a merchant, I sell you something worth $1,000 worth of stuff. I get from you something today. If tomorrow it's going to be worth $500, I don't want that because then I'm taking that risk. So if I want to take that risk, I would just go buy myself cryptocurrency and play that by myself rather than take the risk from taking the payment. Because the way you're thinking of optimizing your payments by saying I want to kind of basically optimize, when it goes up I want to use that, when it goes down I want to hold it. You can use the same thing for stock. You can say, I bought this particular company stock, their results came in, their stock showed up by 10%. Now I want to use my stock to pay for this particular payment I'm using. When stock goes down, I'm just going to hold the stock. So right now, cryptocurrency has become like a commodity, right? And because it's treated as a commodity and because there is a lot of speculation happening on that, it's more of a commodity than a currency right now. Until the time it becomes currency, irrespective of regulation, irrespective of all those things, it will become very hard for businesses to accept that as a form of currency for payment. That's just my opinion.
I have a question on the B2B side. When merchants are paid that don't have any bank accounts, especially in smaller businesses, like I go to a farmer's market and a lot of the guys want cash, but I don't want to carry cash because it's risky. And I don't know how much cash I need, so what's the solution, and when do you think we'll get to a solution where it's bankless B2B payments?
So that becomes a very low margin business because you have very small currency conversions. Like in our platform today, average transaction size is $10,000, right? And the smallest transactions are probably like $800, and the largest are like $7 million. So when you're talking that kind of transaction, it becomes a very profitable business. But if it's going to be $10, $20, and also then who is going to be doing that settlement? How is the money going to move? That's where something like cryptocurrency could become a solution for small value transactions. But then again, these other things need to get kind of resolved before that happens. Jim, you may have something.
I mean, it's a matter of, I don't know that anybody is necessarily going to go out and solve that particular problem at scale. I feel like there's places like in the developing world, like M-Pesa and other solutions that actually solve this already, where there is no banking infrastructure for the majority of the population. You know, a solution to this may come along with something else, but I don't know that it's a pressing problem in the US the way it is in other developing parts of the world where they've sort of been forced into it. But I think it's something that would be a great thing if it happened. I just don't know if it's on the priority list like it is in the developing world.
That's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for all the questions and the engagement. And if we could have a huge round of applause for our panelists, it would be amazing job.